Here is every single book I read this year as a full-time student with a part-time job. So yeah, I didn't read 100 books or even half of that because I was a full-time student with a job and all these other responsibilities, but I am now happily graduated, so next year I'm hoping to read a lot more. But if you're looking for more of a realistic what I read this year, this is for you, and I'm going to still show you every single book I read this year and what I rated it, and then we'll get more into like statistics of what I read this year, like the types of books, my ratings, like how many were 5 stars and all that stuff. So I hope you enjoy this video and sit back and relax because it's going to be a little bit long. So I just quickly wanted to mention that I track all of my books and what I'm reading and what I'm rating them on Goodreads and on my Notion book tracker. So I'm going to link both down below if you want to check them out. And they're really helpful for me to keep track of everything visually, and I like my Notion one because it gives me more of an insight into the types of books I'm reading because of how I set it up. And then Goodreads is always great too because you can look at other reviews and keep up with your page that you're on, and it tells you what % you're in. So if you want to follow me on Goodreads, I'll link it down below. And then my Notion template is in my Etsy shop if you want to check it out. So in January, I read 3 books, and I started the year off with Icebreaker. I started this in December of 2022 and then finished it in January 2023. And I rated it 4 stars. I really enjoyed this book, and I think you should definitely read it if you haven't already. Then I read the Inheritance Games series, so I read the Inheritance Games and the Hawthorne Legacy in January, and then I finished it in February. And I gave the Inheritance Games 4 stars and the Hawthorne Legacy 5 stars. This is my favorite out of the whole series, so you should definitely read the series if you haven't. Okay, so moving on to February, I did finish the Inheritance Games series, so I read The Final Gambit, which I actually gave 4 stars. I really liked this one as well. I was scared because sometimes I don't always like the 3rd book in a series, but they did this pretty well. Then I was kind of in a rom-com romancy mood for Valentine's Day, and I read The Love Hypothesis, which was so cute. I gave it 4 stars, and I do recommend it. Okay, then I read one of my favorite books of the year, which I will get into like all of my favorites at the very end, which will be like probably all my 5-star books, or 4.25. But yeah, so I read Better Than the Movies, and like I said, this was one of my favorite books of the year, so I did rate it 5 stars, and it's so cute and adorable, and you should definitely read it. If you haven't read it though, I actually think you should wait till February for Valentine's Day. It's like the perfect book to read in February for the Valentine's Day vibe. Definitely read this book if you haven't. Give YA a chance if you haven't. It's so adorable and cute. Okay, March was a pretty big reading month for me, and I read 5 books. So I started out the month with Daisy Jones and the Six, which if you've seen some of my other videos, you know the struggle I had with this book, and like I want to love it but I just didn't because of the writing style. I did end up giving it 4 stars because I could recognize what was good about it. It was just the writing style was really hard for me to get into and understand for a while. I think you should read it and give it a chance, or if you think maybe you're not gonna like the writing style, listen to it as an audiobook because it's still a really good story. Might be up falling asleep. Why did I sing it like that? This next book, guys. I still think about this book every single day, which is how you know it's a good book. And it is If He Had Been With Me. This book is the epitome of pain. Like, it's just pain. But it's really good, even though I did cry. I absolutely adored and loved this book, even though it ripped my heart out, crushed it into a million pieces, and stomped on it. I still loved it. So if that's what you're looking for in a book, read this. But yeah, I did give it 5 stars, so you should read it. Then I reread a series that I read all the way back in middle school because I've had these books for that long and I saw them on my shelf, and sometimes it like randomly pops up on my book talk and people talk about it still to this day, so I was like, I'm gonna reread it and see if I still love it. And it was the Selection series. I can happily say that I am still in love with the series. I actually read them so quick when I reread them this year. Still love them. Like, they're great. They're still so near and dear to my heart, and I actually gave them all 4 stars, so you should read this. So in April, I started with Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score, which I had heard so many good things about, but I unfortunately didn't like it. If you want to hear more of like a detailed review, I talk about it more in my 2023 end of year book tag video, so you should check that out. But I gave it 3 stars, and honestly, I don't think you need to read it, and I never continued the series, and I'm fine. So if you think it's not going to be the book for you, I would just skip it. Then I read It Starts With Us because I've been putting this off, and I finally read it, and it was fine. It was nothing crazy. I'm glad I read it just so I know, but I don't think we needed this book. But I don't think it was bad. So I did give it 4 stars because it kept me entertained, and it was like a fine book. I don't think you need to read it, but you want to know more about Atlas and Lily? Sure. Then I read The Deal because I was really wanting a hockey romance for some reason in the middle of April. And then after I read it, I was like, wait, this would be perfect for the winter time. Yeah, I never continued the series. I still haven't yet, but I want to in January, hopefully soon. But I gave this 4 stars. I really did enjoy it. In May, I read one book, probably because finals. But I did read Happy Place, which I really enjoyed. It was like the perfect book to like kick off the summer. I always love Emily Henry's books, and this one had a pink cover, so I was immediately like, give it to me. I don't have the physical copy because I'm waiting for the paperback to match all of my other Emily Henry books. But it was really good, and I gave it 4.5 stars. It was so close to a 5-star, but it just fell a little bit flat for me. Then in June, I read Fourth Wing, which kind of goes against what I usually do in the summer, which is just read summary romance books. But I was really on Fourth Wing TikTok at this time, and everyone's talking about Fourth Wing, and I was like, okay, I'm actually getting tired of all romance from the whole rest of the year, so I was like, I'm gonna try something different and read my first fantasy book. And I'm so glad I did, because I loved it. I gave it 5 stars, and you've probably heard me talk about it if you've seen my other videos. If not, I literally think about this book every single day. I talk about this book every single day. If you're my family, sorry. But it was my first fantasy book, so it has a special place in my heart, and I'm always going to love it, and I'm gonna reread it soon. So if you haven't read this by some miracle, you really should. Yeah, I could talk about this book all day, but I'm gonna put it down and move on. So July, I was traveling and on vacation, so I only read 3 books, but that's pretty good for me being on vacation. Most of it was on my Kindle though, so that's great. I love traveling with my Kindle. She's perfect. So the first book I read in July was One True Loves, and I've been wanting to get into more of Taylor Jenkins Reid's books. Since I didn't really love the writing style of Daisy Jones and the Six, I thought I would try one of her romance books and see if I like that kind of writing style in her other books. And I did like the writing style in this a lot better, and the concept was really interesting. But unfortunately, I just was kind of let down by like the plot, not the writing. The writing was really good. It was just like the plot and what happened, and it was just kind of sad. And when I think about this book, I kind of feel sad. Maybe it's just not for me right now. I think if you're a little bit older, maybe you'd like it. I just really like my silly little YA romances, and this wasn't that. But I gave it 3 stars, and I think if you like more literary fiction romance-ish, you'd like this. Okay, sorry if the angle's a little bit different. I had to change my battery, but continuing on. Then I read Local Woman Missing, and I read this one because I started listening to this podcast called I'll Read What She's Reading, which is really good. If you haven't checked that out, you should. And every month they pick like a book for everyone to read, and then they'll release an episode talking about it later. So that's the book they picked for July, and I wanted to read it so I could finally like listen to the episodes that they talk about, which are really good. But unfortunately, I just did not like this book at all. Honestly, I don't really remember a lot about the book, but I just know I didn't enjoy reading it that much, so I only gave it 3 stars. So I don't think you should really read that book, to be honest. And lastly, in July, I read Every Summer After, which I've heard so many good things about. And also, so many people say it's just like Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren, which I really liked that book, but it wasn't a 5-star for me. So I was like, maybe this one will be the one that's 5 stars. Maybe I'll like this one a little bit more. But I only gave it 4 stars. It was still pretty good. I just didn't like something that happened plot-wise in the book, so I only gave it 4 stars. But I still think you should read it. So I also had a really good reading month in August. I read 6 books, which is pretty good for me, which I'm actually surprised by because I actually had a full course load for school in August instead of just my 2 online summer classes. And I was still able to read 6 books, so that's pretty good for me. So I started with the Natural series. This is how I read so many books, because I read all 4 of them so quick and fast, and I absolutely loved them. So this series as a whole is a 5-star series for me, but I'll also tell you what my individual ratings are for each book. So I gave The Naturals 4 stars, Killer Instinct 4 stars, All In 4 stars, and then Bad Blood I actually gave 5 stars. This one I really enjoyed it, and this one's thick. So this actually does come with a novella in it, but I read them all separately on my Kindle, so I counted them as 5 separate books. But if I had read the physical copy, it would have only been like 4 books. So it's like 5 or 6 this month, depending on how you view it. I really enjoyed this one, and I think you should definitely check out the Natural series if you haven't already. So good. Lastly, in August, I read Malibu Rising, which was another book by Taylor Jenkins Reid that I was just trying to try her out again and see if I could finally get a 5-star out of Taylor Jenkins Reid books. And unfortunately, this wasn't a 5-star, but I really did enjoy it a lot more. This is probably my favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid book that I've read so far, and I gave this one 4 stars. I loved the summer vibes, and I really love the cover of this, and I talk about this more in my book tag video as well. Okay, now we get more into like my audiobook era. So for September, I started with Then She Was Gone. Unfortunately, this did kick off my audiobook era, but at the same time, I did not like it. So I only gave it 2 stars. It is very sad, scary, creepy, weird, and I don't recommend that you read it, but if you like that kind of stuff, go ahead. I just didn't like it, and I didn't like the ending. Then I read a very highly anticipated book for me, which was Archer's Voice. My sister loves this book. It's like her favorite book of all time, and she's always told me to read it. And I've always seen people on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, everybody talk about this book and say how it's like people's favorites of all time. So I finally gave it a try, and I gave it 4 stars. It was good, but it wasn't my exact favorite type of book. I really like a slow burn, and that was one of my big pet peeves with this book and why I couldn't give it 5 stars. But it was really good. I even tabbed it, and there's really good quotes in this. And I still recommend it. I think you should read it and give it a shot. It just wasn't a 5-star for me, but that's okay. I still really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars. Then I read The Brothers Hawthorne, which is like a spin-off series of the Inheritance Game series by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. It's more about the brothers, and I was a little bit let down about this book. I still ended up really enjoying it, so I gave it 4 stars. I'm starting to realize that I'm a little bit generous with my star rating, so that's going to be one of my goals next year, which I'll get into those later in the video if you want to see my reading goals and all that stuff for 2024. Yeah, looking back, maybe I would have rated this like a 3.5, but I still enjoyed it, and I think you should read it if you really like the Inheritance Games, because you get back in that world and you get to see the characters again, and I think it's really setting up for a different book that's going to come out soon, so yeah. Then I read The Atlas Six, which was a 5-star read for me. I absolutely loved this book in like such an unexpected way because it's my first dark academia book, and I've heard a lot of mixed opinions and reviews about this, and I was actually misled to think that this was a romance, and it's not, so don't think it's a romance, but I still gave it 5 stars, so if that tells you anything, I think you should read it. Take it with a grain of salt. It's not everyone's cup of tea. You'll look at the reviews, you'll see. I liked it. I think you should give it a try. Worst case, we move on. But yeah, I gave this 5 stars. And then lastly for September, I listened to The Guest List, which was an audiobook that I listened to on Libby, and I really, really loved this book. I was actually so pleasantly surprised by how much I really enjoyed this audiobook. I was scared that I was going to be bored through some of it, but it really picks up really quick, and it's really interesting because it switches through POVs quickly. It is really good and fast-paced, and I did guess the plot twist a little bit, but not all the way, which is kind of fun for me. I like when that happens because it's like a 50-50 of, yes, I guessed it, and yes, I'm still surprised, you know? And I definitely think you should listen to it or read it. Okay, October is spooky season, so I listened to a lot of spooky thriller mystery books. So first I listened to Never Lie by Alice Feeney, and okay, honestly I rated it a 3-star, but now that I'm thinking about it, I think it would be like more of a 3.5 star because the only thing I didn't like about it was the ending. That's it. Like, the actual concept of the book is really interesting, and I was entertained the whole time. It was just I didn't like the ending. But I still think you should give it a shot because you might like the ending. Then I listened to Five Survive, which I actually heard a lot of good things at the time that I would listen to it, and so I listened to it, and I didn't really like it that much. I gave it 3 stars. I think listening to it honestly made it worse because it felt so much longer, and like they're in one setting the whole time, and it just felt really dragged out. Like, all the characters dragged out everything. And maybe if I had like read it in one sitting, physical copy, I would have liked it more, but I listened to it over like the course of like a week, and no, I was over the book by that point. I don't know if I'd recommend it, but maybe if you want to read it in one sitting, maybe you'll like it better. I don't know. Then I read Divine Rivals, which was so close to a 5-star. I actually ended up giving it 4.5 stars. And honestly, I think it was because I was still in my Fourth Wing hangover from months prior. But I was just reading this book and I was like, the fantasy aspects aren't really hitting the same. It's a really romantic book, which I really liked that aspect, but the fantasy stuff, I felt like it felt flat for me in the fantasy part, and especially after just reading Fourth Wing, I was just like, So I did give it 4.5 stars, but it's super good. If you really love romance, you'll love this, and I am excited to read the second one. I hopefully will like that one a little bit more. And then I read Assistant to the Villain, which was the perfect book to like end out October and have like the spooky vibes for Halloween. And I gave this one 4.5 stars as well. I actually really liked this book way more than I thought I would, and I do think more people should be talking about it. You should definitely read it, and look at these beautiful red sprayed edges. I mean, that's like one of the whole reasons I bought this book, and I don't regret it. I loved it. So you should read it. So for November, I started with His and Hers by Alice Feeney. It was another audiobook, and it's also my first Alice Feeney book. And this one was good. It's just, it took me a really long time to get into it, so I only gave it 3 stars. And I actually also guessed the ending magically somehow, Still unsure how I did that. So it wasn't my favorite, but I still wanted to give her more of a chance, so I do later on in the year. I was a little bit disappointed in this one, but I still think you should check it out if you really love Alice Feeney or you love that genre. Then I read Iron Flame, of course. I'm sure you predicted this if you know that there was another one, especially after how much I raved about Fourth Wing. And I actually only gave this one 4 stars, I think because it's so long and it took me most of the entire month of November to read, that by the time I was finished I was just like, but I did still really enjoy it. There's just a few things I didn't love as much in this one as I did in Fourth Wing, and of course Fourth Wing is just gonna always have such a special place in my heart that this one was like hard to top. But it was still really good, and of course I'm still gonna recommend it, and the Fourth Wing and the Empyrean series, always gonna recommend that. And then to finish off November, I read November 9. November 9. I do have the physical copy that I read way back in like 2020 maybe, and so then I listened to it as an audiobook this time. It was okay. I mean, I knew it wasn't going to be a 5-star. I mean, I've read this book before, and I just had a feeling that I wasn't going to like it as much in this reread as I did way back in 2020 when my expectations were low, you know, but it wasn't terrible. But I do not like the man in this book, so it kind of hurts my little romance heart to enjoy this thoroughly. But I gave it 3 stars when I reread it this time. I don't think you should read it. Honestly, you could probably skip it. I don't know. The storyline is really cool, but it's just the man. The man makes it a no. So for December, I literally don't have any physical copies, so sorry. So I started off December with None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell, who also wrote Then She Was Gone. And I heard a lot of good things about this one, so I was like, I'm going to try it, even though I didn't like Then She Was Gone. And I'm so glad I did, because I really loved this book, and I gave it 4 stars. And it's so unique and a cool concept, and it just keeps you entertained the whole time, and the ending was shocking, and it was just, I loved it, and I definitely think you should listen to it as an audiobook if you're going to read it. Then I got into my Christmassy books, so if you saw my reading Christmas books video, you already know, but I'll be quick. So I read Baggage Claim first, which I actually really liked for a Christmas book. I'm really picky with Christmas books, I've learned this year, but I did like it. I gave it 3 stars. It was cute, it was good. It's just like the man wasn't the best, and then there's this plot line that like I figured out from the very beginning. That's kind of supposed to be a surprise, I guess, but yeah, I guess if you really love Christmas books, you should read it, but I don't really know if I'm like a good critic on Christmas books because I've never really liked one, so take this with a grain of salt. And then I read 'Tis the Season for Revenge, which I did not like. I'm gonna be blunt and frank. I did not like this book, and I gave it 2 stars. But a lot of it is because of the intimate scenes and the fact that they got together so quickly in the book, and then I just felt like it was really repetitive, so I did not like it. And then the last book I read in December, which was actually the last book I've read in 2023, was Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. And I'm really glad I listened to this as an audiobook too, and I'm really glad that I finally read it because I've heard so many good things about it. I'm really glad that I read it, and I gave it 4 stars. It was really good. The ending got me. I was entertained. You should definitely read it. Okay, so those are all the books I read in 2023, and now I'm going to kind of tell you more about the statistics of the books I read, like the types of book, what were 5 stars, my favorite books, my least favorite books, the fastest, the slowest, all that fun stuff. So I listened to 8 audiobooks this year, which is pretty good for me, and I'm definitely going to be prioritizing listening to more audiobooks in 2024 because I really enjoyed it. And then I read 16 books on my Kindle, which is a lot. And then I read 17 physical books. So I did read the most physical books, which I feel like is good for me because I really wanted to downgrade my TBR, but I actually don't think I did that because I bought a lot of books. But that's okay. So let's get into the rating. So I actually rated 0 books 1 star, which is good. I feel like that's good. I don't want to rate a book 1 star because that means I didn't like it. But for 2 stars, I did rate 2 books 2 star. And then I had 8 3-star rated books, 25 4-star books, so that's definitely the most. I rate most of my books 4 stars. And then I had 6 5-star books. So really quickly, I'm going to just reiterate my 5-star books so that way you know what books are my favorite of the entire year. So for my 5-star books, we have If He Had Been With Me, The Hawthorne Legacy, Better Than the Movies, Fourth Wing, Bad Blood, and The Atlas Six. Those are all my 5-star reads, so I definitely recommend you read them and try them out in the new year if you haven't. Okay, now I'm just going to quickly tell you the 5 books that I read the fastest and then the 5 that I read the slowest, because I feel like it's interesting. Because if I read a book really fast, that means I really like it and it's probably going to be a higher rated book. And if I read it really slow, it could be either or. It could be because I'm really enjoying it and like want to soak it in, or it's because I really don't like it and I'm dragging on. So the 5 fastest books I read were, I'm actually going to go in order from least fastest to fastest. Okay, number 5 is actually a tie between Assistant to the Villain and The Atlas Six for 5 Days. Number 4 is Better Than the Movies, which took me 4 days. Then Happy Place took me 3 days. If He Had Been With Me took me 2 days, and then Bad Blood took me 1 day, which is actually shocking because that's a thick book. Okay, now for the slowest books I read this year. Number 5 is Icebreaker for 18 days. The Inheritance Games for 19 days. And third is Daisy Jones and the Six for 20 days. Then second is Iron Flame for 22 days. That's insane. And then number 1, yes, there's a higher one than 22, is Divine Rivals for 28 days. That's literally almost a month. That is insane. That doesn't mean these books are bad, because obviously I rated 2 of these books like 4 and 4.5 stars and all this stuff. Sometimes they just take a while. So that's interesting to note though. Alright, now we're gonna do the book Wrapped thing I've been seeing everywhere on like TikTok and stuff. So basically, if you know what Spotify Wrapped is, it tells you like your top artist, your top song, how many minutes you've listened to songs and stuff this year. And there has been a book version going around, so we're gonna do that now. Okay, it's still loading right now, but all you have to do is go to myyearinbooks.com, and then you can connect your Goodreads, and then it's gonna load all of your top like statistics and authors and books, genres, and all this stuff for 2023. So it's really cool. I'm going to share more of the in-depth version that is on here, and then I'll also show the picture that it gives you. So it says that I read 41 books in 2023, which adds up to 15,109 pages and about 25,685 minutes. That's kind of crazy if you think about it like that. So my top genres and categories, you fell head over heels for romance with 28 books. Makes sense. Oh, and then I read 26 contemporary novels, which are all set in today's world with today's many challenges. Interesting. And then 18 mystery novels. That also makes sense. My top author was Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Makes sense. And I read 9 of her books. My biggest reading month was August with 6 books, so go me. And then it tells me my 5-star reads, which I've already explained. Oh, this is cool. It also says if there was just one way to describe your taste in books this year, it would be enchanting. I like that. I think that's cute. But this website is really cool. If you haven't done yours already, I think you should, and I'm definitely going to save this to do again next year. I really like how they made this. It's really cool. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed seeing every single book I read this year, along with some stats and everything to go along with it. And subscribe if you haven't already, because I'm going to be coming out with a lot more content in 2024 and a lot of reading and vlogs and all this stuff. If you want to continue watching my reading journey, then subscribe and like this video, and I'll see you in the new year. Thank you. Bye!